QR codes. They're everywhere you look. You can spot them on soda cans, billboards, buses, and sometimes even on your computer screen. But while QR codes are incredibly convenient and easy to use, it's nearly impossible to tell where they go without scanning them, making them a popular target for cyber criminals. I was sitting in a restaurant the other day when I was directed to use the plastic flyer on the table. Having already done some research into scams involving QR codes, I felt a little nervous. How do we know that all these codes are safe? The short answer is, with current technological standards, it can be a little hard to tell. Then the next question becomes, can we keep the ease and efficiency of a QR code while at the same time improving the design to protect consumers and businesses? Well, with NSF support, scientists are trying to do exactly that, already developing new designs, changing them from this to this, and even this. Intrigued? Let's explore further. QR stands for Quick Response. You bring up the camera on your smartphone and it scans the unique pattern. But how exactly does that work? Picture in your mind a QR code. What is the first thing that pops into your head? The big squares with black and white patterns, almost like a chessboard, right? Those patterns are specifically designed for your camera to find. So even if there are lots of other elements happening around that imagery, when you find those particular patterns, your camera says, aha, there might be a QR code there. By isolating that barcode image and identifying what modules are black and white, your camera can extract the information. But let's come back to the issue of safety. When I was ordering at a restaurant, I was feeling anxious about using the QR code. Were my concerns justified? Well, to examine that, we need to bring in the term phishing.
Now to the latest scams that are sweeping the country, texts telling people they owe money to a state tolling agency. Cybersecurity pros say it's all meant to get into your bank account.
Are those app update notifications you're getting on your phone legit or a scam? If something feels off about an update notification, it probably is.
More people than ever are reporting scams online. In fact, the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center received more than 880,000 complaints last year. That is a 10% increase over 2022, a record.
Check email addresses and phone numbers to make sure they're legitimate. Call to see if the incoming information is authentic, and wait. Wait before you send money until you can absolutely verify that you're not being scammed.
Phishing is an extremely common and effective way of scamming people, usually in the form of a text message or an email. In fact, there are around 3.4 billion phishing emails sent every day. The text or email pretends to come from a reputable source, such as a friend, family member, or even your bank. But the actual sender is attempting to steal sensitive information from you, such as your credit card number or a password. There are a lot of different forms of phishing out there, with more and more types of scams popping up every day. This list includes email phishing, spear phishing, whaling, smishing, vishing, angler phishing, and now quishing. Quishing is when a phony QR code is made to look legitimate. The QR code works and then it takes you to a website. However, the website that you're directed to is fraudulent. Your phone scans the code and is taken to this website, where you will be directed to put in your financial or other sensitive information onto the site so it can be stolen from you. Which brings us back to my restaurant story. Thankfully, like the vast majority of QR codes, when I scanned it with my phone, it took me to a legitimate website. But what if it had taken me to a fake website, where I would have put in my credit card number? Would I have been able to tell the difference? Because sometimes with these phony websites, it can be hard to tell what's real and what's a scam. A community in Austin, Texas found this out the hard way when over 29 parking meters were covered in stickers with a nefarious QR code. After scanning the code to pay their bill, instead of being taken to the city's authorized website or app, people who scanned the fake QR codes were led to a website that collected their parking fee and their credit card information. The same thing happened in Rochester, New York, with over 20 parking meters covered in bogus QR code stickers. Now that I knew the danger sometimes associated with QR codes, I was curious about how this technology could be improved. After all, with their convenience and widespread use, it doesn't seem like they'll be going away anytime soon. But it wasn't always this way. Despite being invented in the early 90s, it took several decades before widespread adoption took place. Let's look at how QR codes were first invented and why they're so popular today. Popular science creator Veritasium released an in-depth video on the history of QR codes that you should check out. But here's a brief recap. QR codes were first invented in 1994 by Denso Wave Automotive Products Company in Japan. Head researcher Masahiro Hara was inspired by a board game called a Go board. Widespread adoption in the United States came later, partly spurred on by two main events. First, phone companies like Apple and Google began incorporating QR scanning software directly into the camera app, making it easier and faster to use. This was aided with the fact that phone cameras are increasingly getting better and better in terms of resolution and quality. Second, the COVID-19 pandemic. Consumers and companies were looking for a contactless way to order at a restaurant and pay for products that maintains social distancing. Now that we know the history and the reasons behind the popularity of QR codes, it seems clear that for the near future at least, they are here to stay. Which brings us back to, how do we make them more secure? Well, what if the solution to the security issue was hidden in plain sight, inside the code itself? SDMQR, short for Self-Authenticating Dual Modulated Quick Response. If this sounds technical, it's because it is. What this technology does is provide an additional layer of security, like putting a padlock around your phone. An official source, such as a restaurant or a soda company, can now register their URLs ahead of time and embed what's known as a cryptographic signature inside the code. Think of it like a bouncer checking IDs at a club and only letting in the URLs that are on the list. With this new technology in place, your phone will be able to signal to you whether what you have scanned comes from a verified registered source, instead of something nefarious. Of course, with this new technology comes questions about ease of adoption and potentially cost. I spoke to one of the scientists behind this new technology, Dr. Gaurav Sharma from the University of Rochester.
Will it be harder for smaller businesses to adopt this technology?
That's a good question. If you think about where the strongest attack points are, they're really in the big financial and technology areas. If you think about the companies like banks, that's where you're giving your personal information. In those areas are the ones where we think the primary first applications would come. So if you've got a big bank that is capable of doing this, they would easily be capable of registering with the service provider to make sure that QR codes are self-authenticating. And then as that takes off, I would imagine that there would be a good ecosystem for this to actually be something which even smaller companies can afford at a much more reasonable price point. If you look at Google Ads, for example, today you've got all manners of companies, both big companies and small companies, participating in that ecosystem. So just because there's a big provider does not mean that smaller companies don't really have a way to participate in that.
While SDM QR codes may look like a traditional QR code, there are some key differences that you can spot right away. Instead of the black and white squares, the new format uses elongated ellipses. The ellipses can also be colorful and match the branding specifications of a company. But shape and color differences are not merely an aesthetic choice, although they do look pretty cool. But to learn exactly how this technology works, I spoke with Dr. Irving Barron, also of the University of Rochester.
Exactly how do adding these ellipses and colors allow you to embed more information than a standard typical QR code right now?
Let's imagine that if I have a white card, that means yes, and if I have a black card, that means no. So if I just have those two cards, I can only say yes or no. If I have orientations, horizontal, vertical, and the two diagonals, is like now instead of having just two cards, yes or no, I can have yes, no, maybe, and let's say definitely not, right? So I have more ways to communicate, and that translates to having more bits per module that the QR code can carry. So that's essentially how we increase the information.
Color is a slightly different aspect. Color is something which has not been exploited as much, and color is something which I think has been underutilized as an asset that's available for these smartphone devices. Because color is there for free. All these devices, you'd be hard-pressed to get a smartphone with a black and white camera today. With the color, what we are doing is actually embedding 3 barcodes in the 3 channels. And using machine learning techniques, we can actually make sure that they don't interfere with each other when we capture an image. Or the interference we can compensate for and decode those 3 barcodes effectively. So we get effectively this 3 times the data rate in the same footprint.
With more information embedded in links, more security when connecting to those links, and the added benefit of brand logos and color being incorporated into QR code designs, it seems that adopting this technology is a win-win-win for companies. Which begs the question, when can we expect to see widespread adoption? Once again, I ask the experts.
Will the rollout of this technology be sort of an overnight process, or do you foresee a more kind of gradual transition as companies jump on board?
That's a great question. I would like that tomorrow we're able to talk with Google and Apple, and then it's literally just like an update in your phone, and there you go.
On the technology side, we are largely ready. We are doing our part in terms of trying to see how quickly we can take this to commercialization, and we're exploring the avenues there.
What I think, and I would say it's a more conservative view, is having people progressively know that first SDM QR codes exist and see the value. Thanks to you giving us the space to talk about it, it makes it easier for people to find about this technology, and maybe then we can provide the solution.
Thanks to NSF funding and scientists at the University of Rochester, we can look forward to widespread use of SDM QR codes in the years to come. As scams become more and more common and people look for safer ways to use QR codes, hopefully these NSF-supported scientists will be able to, as Dr. Irving puts it, provide the solution.
And soon, whether you're looking up a product online, checking out some information on a flyer, or just thirsty at a bar and trying to order a drink, you can do so worry-free. Cheers.